My wife admitted to cheating with one man. I replied, I know everything. Then I created a group chat with her and the other two men the PI found and dropped the photos. My phone immediately exploded as her entire secret life imploded in the chat. I, 34M, discovered my wife was living a triple life, and when she tried to control the narrative by confessing to just one affair, I unleashed everything I knew in the most spectacular way possible. Let me start from the beginning. My wife and I had been married for 8 years. We met in college, built what I thought was a solid life together, bought a house in the suburbs, and were trying for kids. She worked in marketing for a tech company, traveled frequently for conferences, and always seemed dedicated to her career. I respected that about her. The first red flag appeared about 6 months ago when she started being overly protective of her phone. She'd take it to the bathroom, sleep with it under her pillow, and would quickly close apps when I walked into the room. When I asked about it, she claimed her company had implemented new security protocols that made her paranoid about leaving devices unattended. Then came the unexplained absences. Weekend trips that extended into Monday mornings, late-night work emergencies that required her physical presence at the office, and conferences in cities she'd visited multiple times before, but somehow never invited me to join her for a long weekend. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago when she left her laptop open while taking a shower. I wasn't snooping initially, just closing it to save battery, when a notification popped up from a messaging app I'd never seen her use. The preview showed enough to make my stomach drop. Instead of confronting her immediately, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator. The PI was a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases, and I gave him a simple brief: find out what my wife was really doing during her mysterious absences. What he uncovered was beyond anything I could have imagined. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was simultaneously involved with 3 different men, each believing they were her only secret relationship. The PI provided detailed reports, photographs, hotel receipts, and even recorded conversations that painted a picture of someone I'd never really known. The first man was her actual boss, someone I'd met at company parties and genuinely liked. Their relationship had been going on for nearly 2 years, primarily during those work trips and late nights at the office. The PI had photos of them at expensive restaurants, entering hotel rooms, and behaving like a couple on what appeared to be romantic getaways disguised as business travel. The second man was a client from another city, someone she met during legitimate business conferences, but had developed a relationship with that extended far beyond professional boundaries. Their affair coincided perfectly with her increased travel schedule. The PI tracked them to multiple cities, always staying in the same hotels, always extending her trips by an extra day or 2 that she never mentioned to me. The third man was the most shocking because he lived in our own city. He was a personal trainer at the gym she'd joined 8 months ago, claiming she wanted to get in shape for our planned family. Their relationship was the most physical and happened during her supposed workout sessions and weekend errands. The PI had evidence of them meeting at his apartment, at discreet motels, and even in our own neighborhood while I was at work. Each man knew she was married, but believed he was her only extramarital relationship. She had created elaborate stories for each of them about our marriage being essentially over, about us sleeping in separate rooms, about divorce papers being prepared. She was essentially living 3 separate lives while maintaining the facade of our marriage at home. The PI's final report landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. I spent the entire day at work staring at the evidence, feeling like my entire reality had been a lie. That evening, my wife came home with Chinese takeout and acted like nothing was wrong. She asked about my day, complained about her demanding boss, and mentioned having another conference coming up next month. I decided to wait. I wanted to see if she would come clean on her own, if any guilt would surface, if she would show any sign that she wanted to save our marriage. For 2 more weeks, I watched her lie effortlessly about her whereabouts, her feelings, and our future together. She even brought up starting fertility treatments, knowing full well she was actively betraying our marriage with 3 different men. Last Friday night, she finally cracked. She came home from what she claimed was a work dinner looking guilty and nervous. She poured herself a large glass of wine, sat me down on the couch, and began what I thought would be a full confession. Instead, she told me she'd made a mistake. She admitted to having feelings for her boss, claimed they'd kissed twice during recent business trips, and insisted it had gone no further than that. She cried, apologized profusely, and begged for forgiveness. She promised it was over, that she'd request a transfer to a different department, and that she wanted to work on rebuilding trust in our marriage. As she spoke, I felt something cold and calculating settle over me. She was still lying, still trying to control the narrative, still attempting to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She was confessing to the smallest possible transgression while hiding the full scope of her betrayal. I looked at her tear-stained face and delivered the line I'd been practicing for days. I told her I knew everything. The color drained from her face immediately. She started to stammer, asking what I meant, trying to maintain her partial confession story. I stood up, walked to my laptop, and began typing. I created a group chat and added 4 participants: my wife, her boss, the client from out of town, and the personal trainer. The chat name was simple: The Truth About Sarah's Secret Life. I started by uploading the photographs. Hotel room photos showing her with her boss in intimate situations. Restaurant photos of her with the client in cities she'd told me were strictly business trips. Gym photos and apartment building security footage of her with the personal trainer. Then I uploaded copies of hotel receipts, credit card statements showing charges at romantic restaurants on days she'd told me she was working late, and flight records showing the extended trips she'd never mentioned. Finally, I typed a single message to the group. I think it's time you all met each other. My phone immediately exploded with notifications. The chaos that erupted in that chat was beyond anything I'd anticipated. Each man realized he wasn't her only affair. Each learned details about her other relationships, and all of them began questioning every interaction they'd had with her. Her boss was furious about the professional implications and the lies she'd told about their relationship being exclusive. The client felt completely used and manipulated, especially since he'd been considering leaving his own family for her. The personal trainer was devastated to learn he was just one of multiple men and that all her stories about our dead marriage were fabrications. My wife tried desperately to control the damage, sending separate messages to each man trying to minimize the other's importance. But with everyone in the same chat, every lie was immediately exposed. The group dynamic created a situation where each man was fact-checking her stories in real time, and her web of deceptions unraveled completely. Within 2 hours, her boss had informed her that their professional relationship was over and that HR would be conducting an investigation. The client blocked her on all platforms after unleashing his anger about the manipulation and lies. The personal trainer posted a brutal message about being used and deceived before leaving the chat entirely. By Sunday morning, my wife's entire secret life had collapsed. She'd lost her job, her relationships with all 3 men, and any chance of convincing me that her betrayal was minimal or forgivable. She tried multiple approaches to salvage the situation. She claimed she was having a mental breakdown and needed help. She insisted that none of the relationships meant anything and that I was the only one she truly loved. She accused me of being cruel and vindictive for exposing her publicly rather than handling it privately. But I was done listening to her manipulations. I told her I'd already contacted a divorce attorney and that I was filing for divorce based on adultery. I informed her that I'd be keeping our house and that she had 2 weeks to find alternative living arrangements. The most satisfying part was watching her realize that her carefully constructed lies had been her downfall. If she'd confessed to everything from the beginning, we might have attempted counseling. But her decision to continue lying and manipulating even when caught had eliminated any possibility of reconciliation. Update 1. It's been a week since the group chat explosion, and the aftermath continues to unfold in ways I never expected. My wife moved out Tuesday morning while I was at work. She packed her essentials and left her keys on the kitchen counter with a note claiming she needed space to figure things out. What she didn't know was that I'd already changed the locks and had security cameras installed the day before. Her former boss contacted me directly Wednesday evening. He called to apologize for his role in the situation and to inform me that my wife had been terminated from her position. Apparently, the company's investigation revealed she'd been falsifying expense reports to cover costs for her personal relationships, charging romantic dinners and hotel upgrades to business accounts. They're considering whether to pursue charges for fraud. The most interesting development came from the personal trainer. He messaged me privately through social media, asking if we could meet for coffee. Initially, I was skeptical about his motives, but curiosity got the better of me. We met Thursday afternoon at a neutral location. He apologized profusely for his involvement, explaining that my wife had convinced him our marriage was essentially over and that divorce proceedings were already underway. He genuinely believed he was helping her transition out of an unhappy situation. What he told me next was shocking. My wife had been borrowing money from him, claiming she needed funds for attorney fees and deposits on apartments. He'd given her nearly $15,000 over the past few months, money she'd promised to repay once her divorce settlement came through. Obviously, no divorce proceedings existed, and the money had likely funded her other relationships or personal expenses. He asked if I thought he had any legal recourse to recover the money. I suggested he contact his own attorney, but privately doubted he'd see any of those funds again. The out-of-town client proved to be the most vindictive of the three men. He'd apparently been planning to leave his own wife and had made significant financial commitments based on my wife's lies about our impending divorce. He'd purchased an engagement ring, put a deposit down on an apartment in his city, and had even consulted with attorneys about his own divorce proceedings. By Friday, he'd hired a private investigator of his own to compile evidence of my wife's deception, intending to use it in potential legal action against her. He's considering suing her for fraud and emotional distress. My wife has been staying with her sister, who contacted me over the weekend demanding I explain my actions. Apparently, my wife's version of events painted me as an abusive husband who'd hired investigators to stalk her and then publicly humiliated her for having feelings for someone else. Her sister's call was illuminating because she had no idea about the scope of my wife's deception. She thought we were dealing with a standard case of marital problems and infidelity, not the elaborate web of lies and manipulation I'd uncovered. I calmly explained the situation, offering to send her copies of the evidence if she wanted to understand what had really happened. She declined, but her tone changed significantly once she realized the complexity of what her sister had done. The divorce proceedings are moving forward quickly since I have overwhelming evidence of adultery and fraud. My attorney is confident we can protect most of our assets, and that any attempt by my wife to claim significant alimony will fail given her conduct. I've been surprised by how little guilt or sadness I feel about the end of our marriage. The person I thought I'd married apparently never existed, and mourning the loss of an illusion feels pointless. Update 2. 3 weeks have passed since my wife's secret life imploded, and the legal and personal consequences continue to escalate beyond anything I anticipated. My wife's former company filed criminal charges against her for expense account fraud. The investigation revealed she'd stolen nearly $30,000 over the past 2 years, using company funds to finance her multiple relationships. Her attorney contacted mine asking if I'd be willing to testify about her character, hoping to negotiate a plea deal that would avoid jail time. I declined to help her, but the request made me realize how completely her life had unraveled. She's facing potential criminal charges, multiple civil lawsuits, and a divorce that will leave her with minimal assets. The personal trainer followed through on pursuing legal action to recover his money. His attorney discovered that my wife had also borrowed funds from the out-of-town client under similar pretenses, claiming she needed money for divorce proceedings that never existed. Together, they filed a joint civil lawsuit against her for fraud. More surprisingly, the out-of-town client's wife contacted me directly. Apparently, when he confessed his affair to her, he showed her the group chat evidence to explain how he'd been deceived. She was so impressed by my methodical approach that she hired the same private investigator I'd used to ensure her husband wasn't hiding additional relationships. Her investigation revealed that her husband had been unfaithful multiple times throughout their marriage, not just with my wife. She's now filing for divorce and wanted to thank me for inadvertently exposing her husband's pattern of infidelity. The most disturbing revelation came when my wife's sister called again, this time with information that reframed everything I thought I knew about my wife's behavior. She admitted that my wife had exhibited similar patterns in previous relationships, including during college when she'd simultaneously dated multiple men without any of them knowing about the others. Her family had hoped marriage would stabilize her behavior, and they'd been willfully blind to signs that the patterns were continuing. Her sister revealed that my wife had been asking family members for money over the past year, claiming we were having financial difficulties and needed help with mortgage payments. She'd collected thousands of dollars from various relatives under false pretenses, money that had likely funded her secret relationships. This information prompted me to conduct a thorough review of our joint finances. What I discovered was systematic financial deception that went far beyond what I'd initially uncovered. She'd opened credit cards in her name without my knowledge, accumulated significant debt, and had been making minimum payments using money she'd borrowed from her affair partners. Our financial situation was far worse than I'd realized, and her web of lies had extended into every aspect of our shared life. The divorce proceedings have become more complex as these financial irregularities come to light. My attorney is working to ensure I'm not held responsible for debts she accumulated through deception, but the process is revealing how thoroughly she'd compartmentalized and hidden her actions. I've had to inform our mortgage company about the situation since some of the fraudulent expenses were charged to our joint accounts. They're investigating whether any of her actions constitute mortgage fraud, which could have additional legal implications. Through all of this chaos, I've been surprised by my own emotional state. Rather than feeling devastated or betrayed, I feel relieved that the truth has finally emerged. Living with someone who was essentially a stranger pretending to be my wife had been more psychologically damaging than I'd realized. Update 3. 2 months have passed since I exposed my wife's triple life, and the final pieces of this elaborate deception are still falling into place. My wife pled guilty to embezzlement charges and received 18 months of supervised probation along with an order to pay full restitution to her former company. The plea deal allowed her to avoid jail time, but she'll be working minimum wage jobs for years to pay back what she stole. The civil lawsuit filed by the personal trainer and out-of-town client resulted in a judgment against her for the money she'd fraudulently obtained from them. Since she has no assets and minimal income prospects, they're unlikely to recover their funds, but the judgment will follow her for years. More shocking was the discovery that her deceptive behavior extended beyond her romantic relationships. Her family revealed that she'd been stealing from them as well, taking money from her elderly grandmother's purse during visits and forging her father's signature on small checks over the past several years. They'd suspected but never confronted her about these thefts, hoping that her marriage to me had provided the stability she needed to change her behavior. Learning about the scope of her deception with me finally convinced them to pursue legal action for the family thefts as well. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. Due to her criminal activity and the fraud she'd committed during our marriage, she received no alimony and minimal asset division. I kept the house, most of our savings, and our joint assets since I could prove they'd been earned through my income while she was stealing money to fund her affairs. Perhaps the most satisfying conclusion came from an unexpected source. The out-of-town client's wife, whom my actions had inadvertently helped discover her own husband's infidelities, sent me a bottle of expensive champagne with a note thanking me for helping her escape her own deceptive marriage. She's thriving in her post-divorce life and has started a support group for people who've discovered their spouses were living secret lives. She invited me to speak at one of their meetings about the importance of trusting your instincts and the value of obtaining concrete evidence before confronting a deceptive partner. My wife made one final attempt to contact me last month, sending a letter through her attorney claiming she'd been diagnosed with a personality disorder and asking for forgiveness. She insisted that her behavior was the result of mental illness and that she was seeking treatment to become a better person. I felt no sympathy reading her letter. Mental illness might explain her behavior, but it doesn't excuse the elaborate lies, financial fraud, or the years of manipulation she'd subjected me and others to. Her diagnosis felt like another attempt to avoid taking full responsibility for her choices. The most important lesson I learned from this experience was trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. The red flags had been there for months, but I'd rationalized them away because I wanted to believe in the person I thought I'd married. Creating that group chat and exposing her entire web of lies simultaneously was the most effective approach I could have taken. If I'd confronted her privately or dealt with each relationship separately, she would have found ways to manipulate the situation and continue her deceptions. By forcing all her lies into the same space at the same time, I ensured that her carefully constructed compartments collapsed completely. Each person she'd deceived could see the full scope of her manipulation, making it impossible for her to maintain any of her false narratives. I'm now focused on rebuilding my life with a clear understanding of who I am and what I want in a genuine relationship. The experience taught me that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from discovering that the person you loved never actually existed. The group chat that destroyed her secret life gave me back my real life, and for that, I have no regrets about my actions.